My name is Karen Bates, and I am so glad you're here. I really value your time, so I'm going to jump right into the presentation, and I'll talk a little about myself and my story as I go through the 7 steps that we're going to try to cover today. So let me pull that up. Okay, here it goes. Okay, so this is 7 steps to discovering and using your unique gifts to bless the world while prioritizing your family. First, why I'm doing this webinar. I have, as I've gotten older, noticed that a lot of us are struggling. There's a lot of struggles in the world, you know. It's part of why we're here, I think. And as I've seen my kids get older and their friends have struggles and they have struggles, and my own family and friends, I've come to realize that there really is a battle raging all around us between light and darkness, and that we have a part to play in that battle. Each one of us has unique gifts and talents that we can use to help the people around us who are struggling, to help ourselves when we're struggling. And so as I've come to really understand and prioritize this idea into my life, I've come to learn some really important principles that I think can bless others, and that's why I'm trying to share them. I'm going to start by talking about my favorite movie. Well, one of my favorite movies. It's Spider-Man Far From Home. And if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to give away the plot or anything, but there's a couple principles in it that I want to make sure that we understand. And then if you watch it later, you can just get that much more out of it from the principles we talked about. But this young man, Peter Parker, is Spider-Man. And at the beginning of the movie, he is really not liking the fact that he's Spider-Man. He just wants to be a regular teenager, right? And so he's getting ready to go on his senior trip, I believe it is, and he doesn't want to have to worry about superhero stuff. So he talks to his aunt and he says, "I'm just going to go and take a break. I am so ready for a break." She's like, "Well, maybe you should pack your Spider-Man suit just in case." He's like, "No, I'm not even packing it. I don't want to worry about it. There's other people that can take care of it." And so he goes on this vacation, and he is pursuing his passions, is what you would say, right? He's doing what he wants to do. And a lot of times that's the message that we're giving our youth today, and even ourselves, is that that's the important thing, is to pursue your passions. And that is how you will be happy. Well, that's what Peter was doing. He wanted to do that. But as he went on his vacation, things started to happen, and he realized that he had a work to do, and he was not very happy about it. So he's sitting one day talking to this guy on the right. He's on my right, maybe he's on your left, I'm not sure, but his name is Mysterio. And he's sitting there talking to him one day, and he's like, I guess I'm not very happy about this, but I do have a responsibility, and people have trusted me, and I probably should do it. And Mysterio asks him, "Well, what do you want, Peter?" And Peter's like, "Well, I don't know." And he's like, "Yes, you do. What do you want? You've been thinking about it." And Peter had been thinking about it a lot. And so he rattled right off, "I want to be on vacation with a girl I like and maybe give her a kiss." And he's like, "Well, there you go." And they have this nice chat about that. And so Peter decides that, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do what I want. And he starts to shirk his responsibility. And he doesn't even realize that's what he's doing. He thinks he's doing the right thing. And I think that's such an important message, because when we deceive ourselves about what we really want and about what we're really doing, it's really easy to be fooled into other things and to deceive ourselves about what we should do. And so that has to do with the first step I'm going to share in a minute. But I'll start with this little picture here. This is a young man going on a hike to the top of the mountain, right? There's a trail. And I think this illustrates the potential danger or misconception about pursuing your passions, because if you look at him and in this picture, where are his dreams, passions, and desires located? And when I did this presentation to a group of people, some people said, "Well, up there at the top, right? Those are his dreams." And I think that's a lot of times what we think, is that we've got to hike to our dream. But really, if you look at the picture, they are all within him. Nothing in that picture shows his dreams or passions. They're inside of him. And if he's focused on pursuing them, he's going to be walking in circles around himself. He's not going to be able to get very far because he can't see what's ahead. And so the only way we can see what's ahead is by climbing up a little farther. And so I think it's sad when we tell people that they've got to form a life vision. They have to decide where they're going to be in 5 years and make sure that they reach that no matter what. Because as we go further along on our path, we'll see new visions, we'll see new things we hadn't noticed before, and our desires will change and our goals will change, and that's okay. That's a good thing. And so it's okay to make plans and move ahead in what we think we want and what we think is right now, and just with the knowledge that it's probably going, most likely, almost always, it's going to change. It's going to be different in the long run, and that's a good thing. That's what we should expect and want, because as we grow, so do our desires and dreams. So this next side talks about how we need to make this shift. We need to decide, and that we need to go from seeking what we want to a desire to use our gifts and talents to make the world better for each other. And so this is a shift that we make as we get more mature. As we're little, everything's about us and our desires, and that's what we see. But as we get older, hopefully we start to make this shift and start to notice that there's needs around us and we can help fill those needs. This is kind of how I came to realize this. As I was growing up, I was the only girl. These are my 3 brothers. And I was used to getting my way. I had, a really good family, and a mom who loved me very much, and she wanted to give me what I needed. And so that's kind of, my lifestyle growing up. And as I got married pretty young. I was only 20. I had just barely turned 20. And our first baby was born just 2 days before our first anniversary. So I was also a mom of it at a very young age. And I was not prepared for what that entailed. I was really excited to have a baby. I thought I would get to dress her up and I would get to cuddle her and she'd be my little constant companion. We'd go places and it'd be so much fun. I did not realize that they don't that they need you all the time. They're not always happy. They cry a lot. And I was just kind of shell-shocked. I remember thinking, this is unreal. Do people really do this day in and day out? Because it's just doesn't seem human, I felt like it was some kind of alternate reality. And I do remember just laying in bed and crying whenever she would wake up because I didn't want to have to get up again, and it just seemed so hard. And I remember thinking at the time, this is my limit. I can have one child and I cannot do any more because I'm already super overwhelmed. And as she got a little bit older, I started to realize, I needed to grow into this capacity. I couldn't just keep living the way I was. And so I started doing a little bit more study and more reading. I already had done a lot of college and I had studied marriage, family, and human development. And I thought I knew what I was getting into, but I really had no idea. So I had to kind of learn from real life experience what that entailed and how to grow into that role. And I did. I had to learn. Well, I decided to have one more child. I had 2, and I thought, I could probably do one more so my baby girl isn't an only child. And not that there's anything wrong with being an only child, but I just thought she would enjoy a sibling. And so I decided to have one more. And little by little, as I kept growing and learning, I was able to shift my priorities and my dreams. And now I have 8 children. Here they are. And the age range right now is 2 to 20. They span quite a big age range. And my, like I said, my youngest is 2. And one of the things, or the principles that I've learned as I've learned how to prioritize my time in order to be able to raise these children while still having time for developing my talents and doing this, writing and studying and sharing some of these things with people, is that I have to really hone in onto what's most important to me. I could be trying to keep up with my neighbor, trying to do what they do, but we each have different purposes and different paths, and if that's what my goal is or what I try, if I'm comparing myself to others, then I won't do my unique thing, and so I won't have time for it. And so I've kind of had to realize, what is that and how to prioritize it and how to prioritize my life and the different areas in it. to help that come to pass. I've learned to let go of what I can't control or what doesn't add to my unique path. And I've learned to rely on a source of power much higher than my own. So I will be talking about God through this presentation. If you're not a religious person, I encourage you to substitute maybe a higher power or altruistic love into that as we talk about these principles, because I think they can still help you. But for me, that is God, and so I will refer to him as God. So what I call my warrior journey, this path I took in order to understand how to do these things, is that I had to realize that it wasn't about me, right? When I had my little girl, all of a sudden things weren't about me. I wanted to make the world a better place for her, and my home a better place for her, and myself a better person for her. And so I learned to discover what my part was, and to start discovering what my part was to make the world better for those I love. So we're going to go through 7 steps to help us start and move forward on that journey. So step 1 is to practice discerning our motives and the motives of others and where they lead. And so, of course, it's not a good idea to be guessing at other people's motives, because we're probably going to be wrong. We don't know why people do the things they do. But the nice thing is that there's literature and there's movies, and they'll tell us why they're doing what they're doing, right? They'll say it right there on the script. And so we can know their motives and where they lead. And so I love to do this with my kids. We'll watch, one of our favorite movies is Lord of the Rings, so we'll watch that and we'll talk about, like, well, why did Frodo go on his quest? What was his motive? And of course it was to save the Shire, to save those he loved. And what did the Sackville Bagginses do? Why did they stay? What was their motive? And it was comfort. They wanted to be in their hobbit hole and have stuff. And what did that lead them to? And were they happy? So we talk about the different characters and why they did what they did. Les Mis is another example. We love, it's just so deep, and there's so many great lessons in them all. But Javert, of course, was driven by his desire for redemption through justice. He wanted to make sure everything was just, and that he took care of that because he felt he needed to justify himself. And then there was, Fantine, who at first was driven by this desire to be loved, and then when she was betrayed, she was driven by fear a lot. And so she made some really not very good choices because of that fear. And so we can talk about, like, when we're making choices out of fear, where do they lead? And then, of course, the bishop, who was driven by love for his fellow men and all of the good he did because of that, and how he changed Jean Valjean, and how he was then able to be driven by love. And so there's just a lot of really great lessons we can learn from literature, and we can read these stories to our children and talk about motives, and then they can start looking into their own motives, and we can do that for ourselves too. Like, what is my motive right now? Why am I doing this? And why am I choosing to put this into my life? And as we start to be more clear about our motives, we can start to make better decisions about how we spend our time. So that's step 1, is to start making that a practice with ourselves, with our children, and in the things that we read or watch and study. Then step 2, I say notice what bothers you, and that's one way to put it. It can be, what is an issue in the world that really you wish could be solved, or a problem you see in your family or in yourself that you really wish could be overcome. So that is what we call our mountain. And when we are trying to climb that mountain, is when we reach where we want to go. And so one of the things that I noticed about me was that it really bothered me when I would see parents let their children use devices and things for a really long time, like play video games all the time. And I noticed that it didn't bother a lot of other people the same way it bothered me. And I started to wonder, why is that? Why is this bugging me so much? And it was a hint to me later that one of my goals, and one of the things that I need to be doing in life, is to help nurture people into their potential. And one of the reasons this bothered me was because I felt like it was wasting away a lot of potential. And so that was a hint to me about something that I needed to do. And so you can start to look at those things and notice that in your kids as well. What is it that bothers them, and what injustices do they find most frustrating? And that gives you a really good hint into the things that they need to be doing with their time, and causes that they can help with and use their gifts for. So one way we can start doing that as a family is, it takes experience, right? A lot of times we don't know until we see it. And so we can watch documentaries. That's helped my family a lot, when we see other places in the world that are missing things, that don't have what we have, and that motivates them to want to do something about it. We recently saw a Tim Ballard movie where he is rescuing children from sex trafficking. And that really impacted, I didn't watch it with my little ones, but my older kids, and they were like, something has to be done. And so when you watch these things and see the suffering, you start to realize that you can't just sit around and entertain yourself. You've got to be doing something to help those people around you. So, service projects, going out and serving someone, we often see some of the suffering that they're going through. Humanitarian trips, are also a great way to do that. So, and then just life experience, talking to people, hearing their struggles, and trying to figure out ways to help them, taking them cookies or whatever way we feel inspired to help. So this brings me to the story of Gladys Aylward. She is one of my heroes. If you haven't read her book, it's called Gladys Aylward, Little Woman. And she's incredible, and I like to share her story because it just follows this pattern so clearly. When she was a young girl, she wanted to be an actress, right? She was pursuing that passion, and she loved being on stage, and she loved speaking. And then one day she said she went to a religious meeting, and she realized that God had a claim on her life. She didn't ever really consider that before, and she started wondering what she could do for him. And a little later, she heard that the people in China, many of them had never heard of Jesus Christ. And that shocked her, and that surprised her, and she she thought someone should do something about it. It didn't seem right. And so she went to a lot of her Christian friends, and she said, did you know that the people in China, I had never heard, and they're like, oh, that's really sad, and someone should probably do something about that. But nobody's as concerned as she was. So after a while, she finally realized, that probably means that I ought to do something about it myself. And so she started trying to figure out how to do that. She started saving money and started working in different ways, she even went to like a missionary college to see if they would accept her so that they could teach her the language and send her. But when they tried to teach her, they realized she was really slow at learning it, and they said that they couldn't accept her. So she went through all sorts of avenues and different things to try to get to this work she had. And sometimes she thought, maybe I'm not supposed to go. Maybe this isn't right. It doesn't seem to be panning out. But the thought of China would never leave her. And so eventually, through a lot of hardships and struggles, I won't give away the whole story. You should read the book. But she was able to make it to China. And another really cool thing is when she got there, she's like, well, how am I going to even teach these people? But she was later able to be hired as a government worker, and she got to go to all the different provinces and examine the women's feet. They were trying to end the foot binding tradition, and she was asked to go and check the women, make sure they weren't binding their feet. So as she checked their feet, she got to tell them stories about Jesus and from the Bible, and they loved him, and fairy tales too that she had heard that taught important principles. And they loved listening to her, and she learned that these speaking skills and these acting skills that she had acquired as a little girl really helped her in her work in China. And so there is this truth about pursuing our passions that, we shouldn't pursue our passions, but we should use them as hints into what work we have to do. And so they will lead us. We have certain interests for a reason and certain talents, and so they can lead us to our work. But like I said, if we're busy pursuing them, they'll often just leave us walking in circles around ourselves. So she's a great example of that principle in action. Step 3 is identifying our summit. And so this is where I like to ask, if you're here with me, I would ask you what the summit is, right? If the mountain is an issue that we're trying to help solve, or a problem that we see, what is the summit? And again, this is where people think, well, it must be your dream or that problem solved. And in a way it is, but I like to say, or I think a better, more accurate way of putting it is who we've become, or we've been able to master that challenge. So, or do our part in helping with that challenge is probably more accurate. So say that my summit is getting healthy. Maybe I haven't been very healthy and I want to get healthy. And so who I am at the top, it would be a healthy person, and my struggle is maybe discipline, learning discipline in order to not eat what I shouldn't eat, or to exercise or something like that. So being a disciplined person would be my summit. It's a character trait that I'm trying to develop to become that kind of person. Another example would be, say this is one that I used once. I realized that I had a really hard time being stressed about time, because I worried I didn't have enough time to do all the things I wanted to do. And I realized too that it was because I feared my ability to be guided into what I needed to do. Like, I trusted God, and I knew that I didn't have more to do in a 24-hour day than I could do, but I didn't trust my ability, my discernment. And so I decided I wanted to work on my trust in myself and discerning and practicing that trait. And so the summit, or the goal that we want to reach, instead of being some kind of short-term goal that we focus on, it should be a character trait, something that we're trying to develop in ourselves. And then our short-term goals can be things that help with that character trait, that remind us of that character trait. Otherwise, they become distractions. You know, if my goal is health, and my summit is health, and my short-term goal is not eating sugar, and then I become so focused on not eating sugar and get so down on myself whenever I do eat sugar, that goal is something I end up beating myself up with because it's not a reminder of what I'm trying to become. And so our goals can get in our way if we don't use them as reminders of a greater, higher purpose, a character trait we're trying to develop. If we lose that sight, then we end up being perfectionistic and hard on ourselves and not happy because we often fail and we make mistakes and we stumble. So that's a summit, identifying a character trait that we want to develop to become more the person that we want to be. So step 4 is to leave the non-essential. So of course, when we go on a trip, right, we can't take our whole house with us. We have to leave behind the things that aren't going to serve in that trip. So as we're going on this warrior journey and trying to figure out how to get to be the kind of person that we need to be to solve the issues that we are uniquely feeling called or start to see that need to be solved, we need to be willing to leave behind some of the things that aren't serving that purpose. And I like to call this the warrior sacrifice, because that's what it takes. If you watch, many movies, so apparently not, but so if we watch any movie where there's something good that happened, someone that did something good for the world, they had to sacrifice something in order to be able to do that, right? For Peter, it was his idea of what his summer vacation ought to look like. And, any superhero, you'll see sacrifice, and that's what we've got to be willing to do if we want to be able to do some good in the world. We have to think about, what do I need to sacrifice in this area of my life, or whatever it may be. So my slide is not going. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so okay, so this is a story about my diagnosis and how I learned, or how I came to understand this principle of sacrifice a little bit better. A few years ago, I was having some concerning physical symptoms, and I put them off for a long time because I don't like to go to the doctor, and I thought I could get away with not going and it would fix itself, but it wasn't fixing itself. So I finally went to see someone, and I learned that I had an autoimmune disease, and I had never heard of autoimmunity. I didn't know what it was, but he said that I needed to get on some medicine that I would have to take for the rest of my life, that this was not curable, and that I would have to just manage it through medicine forever. I would have to start getting on some injections that I would take once a month, and that would be what I'd have to do. And so I went home a little confused and worried, and I studied a lot on it. And I learned, there was a lot of different theories and, of course, a lot of different opinions. But one of the things that struck out to me was that one of the holistic doctors said a lot of times these things happen because your immune system is confused. It is fighting blindfolded. And so you need to detox your body in order to help it stop being so confused and attacking itself. And the other thing that stuck out to me was that a lot of times this theory was that our body is putting out what we do to ourselves mentally. And so it made me start to wonder, do I attack myself mentally? And I realized that a lot of times I did. I was pretty hard on myself, and I needed to learn to be kinder and more forgiving and more gentle. And so these two things started helping me realize that I needed to make a warrior sacrifice, not just in the things that I ate. I did need to start eating better, but I also noticed I had toxic pride in my heart, toxic thoughts in my head that weren't always kind or positive, and there was a lot of unneeded tasks in my time and distracting things in my environment that kept me from being as healthy as I could. And so I started to sacrifice some of those things in order to get my health back and to be able to be healthier. And it did work. I haven't had to take the medicine yet, and I'm really grateful. It's been a couple of years, and I've been able to keep it at bay by trying to live some of these principles. So if we already have a full plate, if we already have all of these things on our plate that we're trying to balance, and then we're putting more things in it, right? Like, oh, that looks like a really good idea. Oh, my neighbor does that. I should probably do that too. And, oh, I just read about this in this book and I'm going to start applying that. It starts to overflow and we feel just overwhelmed and way too flustered to do any of it right. And then eventually we just kind of drop it all and recoup for a while or turn to chocolate chips is usually what I do. And so that's another reason that it's really important to make a warrior sacrifice, because we want to be able to put the things on our plate that actually lead us to where we want to go and aren't just keeping us busy. And so another reason is that sacrifice generates power. If you believe in God, you know that he sacrificed his son. And so if we are trying to be like him and trying to follow in his footsteps, if we use that principle of sacrifice, we are connected to him, and his power is great, and we can do a lot more than we could do on our own if we aren't willing to sacrifice things. So that also reminds me, actually, I'll go back to that, of the principle of balance. Like I was saying, this full plate that we're trying to balance. A lot of times we think that we have all of these different areas of life and we've got to balance them and spend a little time on each one, and that's what balance means. But I really believe that balance instead is like yoga, right? When you're standing in a pose and you're tipping over, if you can focus on one spot, you have a lot more balance. And I think when we do that in life, when we're focused on, that character trait or that person who we're trying to be like, then we have, for me it's Christ, then we have that balance in our life and we can know what we need to keep and what we need to get rid of. So now, at this point, we've decided to leave our comfort zone. That's when we start looking at our motives and realizing, I want to have a motive of love, because as we study motives, we realize that is the motive that leads people to good and happiness and joy and peace, and the people around them to those same things. They impact the world for good. And so we decide that's the kind of people we want to be. And as our kids get more experience, they'll start to notice that that's what they want as well. And then we choose a mountain. And of course, these will change too. It's not like we have to choose one mountain for the rest of our lives and always be climbing it. We can say, this is the cause I want to be involved in. This is the summit I want right now. And it may change in the future. I may accomplish it, or maybe something else will come up that I realize is more important. And that's a good thing. That's okay. But we've chosen one that we want to start climbing now, and the summit that we want to reach, and that we've been willing to make a warrior sacrifice to reach it. We are ready for step 5, which is choosing a guide to get us there. So, in the Lord of the Rings, like I said, one of our favorite movies, Frodo chooses Gandalf. And he chooses Gandalf because, well, Gandalf sort of chooses him, but he decides to trust Gandalf because he's been there. He's wise. He's been around for a long time. And Frodo trusts him. He knows he's good and kind and is trying to do what's best for him. So he chooses Gandalf as his leader. George Washington, he had this quote by him. It says, he's one of the greatest leaders of all time, right? We could all agree that he is incredible. And he was also guided by a leader. He had to choose a leader, and all good leaders have another leader that they've chosen. And George Washington said, "No man has a more perfect reliance on the all-wise and powerful dispensations of the Supreme Being than I have, nor thinks his aid more necessary." So he chose God as his guide, and it brought him good as he tried to follow and be proactively obedient. And the reason I say proactive is because a lot of times we think of obedience as doing something we're commanded to do. We wait around, and when we're commanded to do it, then we do it. That's being obedient. But proactive obedience is seeking what we ought to do, going to our leader and seeking, how can I make this world better, and trying to do those things that we feel called to do or that we feel inspired to do. So it's really important that we're not just passively obedient, but that we're proactively obedient if we really want to do some good in the world. And this man in the corner, he goes by Brother Young. He wrote this book, The Heavenly Man, and I can't remember his real name. He just goes by Brother Young through the book. But I wanted to use his example here because he was such a he lived in China when, he's still alive, but he lives in America now. But at the time, he was persecuted a lot for being Christian by the government, and so he ended up in jail a lot for teaching the gospel. And I'll tell this story from the book. He was in jail once. He had tried to escape, and so the guards had taken him and broken his legs, shattered him, so he couldn't walk. So he wouldn't try to escape again, and he was laying in bed feeling pretty discouraged. And he propped his feet up because that helped ease the pain a little bit, and he's laying there, and he's thinking about the dream he had the night before. He had dreamt that his wife had come to him in a dream and said, "The doors are open. Why don't you walk out?" And he woke up with this feeling like, whoa, that was really real. What did that dream mean? It wasn't just a passive dream, but I'm not sure what to make of it. And he decided to pick up his scriptures, and he's reading his scriptures, and he reads in Jeremiah. And I can't remember the verse he read, but it was something about escaping. And he's like, well, that's weird. That's two visions. I can't possibly try to escape now. But, I've already tried, and it wasn't good, and this prison is so secure. But then a little while later, one of his prison mates, another fellow Christian, came up to his cell, and he said, "Hey, Brother Yen, I feel inspired. I don't know why, but I feel inspired to tell you that you need to try to escape again." And to him, Brother Young, who had been so accustomed to following the directives from the Lord and to seeking them, it wasn't an option anymore. He was like, well, I've had 3 witnesses now. I know I need to do this, and I know I'm going to get shot. So it must be my time to go. So I'm just going to prepare for that. But if this is the Lord's will, then that's what I'm going to do. So he put on his scriptures. He wrapped them. I think he had written some in like some toilet paper or something. He wrapped them around his belt, and he decided to try to escape. So he asked someone to help him get to the bathroom. And at that point, he's like, okay, well, now is my chance. And there were prison guards in the hallways, and he's like, okay, well, I'm going to get caught now. So he started walking by the prison guards, and none of them noticed him. They just kind of were blinded or didn't see him. It was almost like he was invisible, and he was really confused. And he gets to this gate that's normally locked, and it was open. And he gets to the field, right, where all the guns are, and he's just ready. Okay, I'm going to be shot any second now, and nobody shoots him. And finally, he walks straight out of the prison. And he hails a taxi cab, I don't know what they're called in China, but to drive him to a friend's house, a Christian friend. And when he arrives, he tells them he's escaped, and he can hear the policemen out now. They're trying to find him. They realize he's gone, and they're starting to blockade the roads and finding this escaped prisoner. And he asks them if they have a place for him to hide, and the family says, we do have a place for you to hide. It's not here, but it's really close. And so if you'll take the bike, and one of our family members will guide you. He'll sit in the back of the bike, and you go. So he's sitting there pedaling the bike, getting ready to go to this hiding place, when he realizes that he's pedaling a bike. He's like, well, that's the first time. He says, maybe I'll read it to you, his words. He says, all of the events in the jail seemed to happen in just a few moments. It was like a daydream. After arriving at the home of some Christian friends, I was given a bicycle, and one of the family members rode on the back, directing me to my hiding place, wisely traveling down small alleyways to avoid the roadblocks being set up on the main streets because of my escape. The moment I started to pedal the bicycle was the first time I realized the Lord had healed my feet and legs. My mind had been so focused on obeying the Lord and preparing to be shot that I never even noticed that God had healed me. And I love his story for 2 reasons. One, it's just a cool story, right? Nobody has ever escaped from that prison since, and those several guards got fired that day because of what happened. Nobody knows how he was able to escape. But I love it because, those stories can depress us about how much evil there is in the world and how hard things are for some people. But at the same time, instead, they can give us a lot of hope that there is so much good, and there's so many good people that are willing to do hard things to bring about a great cause. And those people are inspiring. Like I mentioned Tim Ballard earlier, he's a guy who's trying to do so much good, and he has, because he has this cause, and each one of us has that ability to do a lot of good if we're trying to be proactively obedient. He had been his whole life, because his life was in danger so much that he needed to seek the Lord's will and do it, or he might get killed. Our life isn't quite in so much danger, right? Like if we don't heed those promptings, if we don't seek them, we're probably going to be okay, but we're just not going to have as happy of lives, or live our purposes fully, and miss out on the fulfillment that comes from doing that. So step 6 is to learn how our leader leads us, right? Our guide leads us. And that means we need to establish a connection to that guide. And that may be done in different ways. I like to set up connection points in my day to connect to God. And so I'm going to show you the first connection principle, or the first connection tool that I teach my kids and that I teach in my programs and stuff, that helps us be able to do that each morning. So that's right here. I call it the morning daily connection. And it's how we connect to our chosen leader in the mornings. Like I said, I have 3 other connection rituals that I try to do, but this one is really, really powerful. It will transform your life if you start to apply it today. It will put you on the fast track to getting where you need to go, instead of wandering around in circles or trying to figure things out, because where we want to be in 20 years starts by what we do today, right? So we don't have to figure out like what our career path is, or what we need to be doing, so far ahead, because if we know what we need to do today, each day we'll be led to that thing. It'll just come to us. The opportunities will present themselves, and we'll know to take them, and we don't have to be chasing dreams. We'll grow into them. So this is the morning daily connection, how we connect to our chosen leader. Step 1 is to pour. And I say that because, we pour out our souls, and to me this means prayer. I pour my soul out to God. I tell him what I'm thankful for, what I'm struggling with, some of the questions and thoughts in my head, what I'm overwhelmed with. I just pour out all those things. I like to sometimes do this in my journal, because it's really helpful for me to sort out my thoughts. And so sometimes I'll just write a letter to God in my journal, and I'll just say, here's what's on my mind, and I'm really grateful for these things, and just pour out my soul that way. And then, if you're not religious, I do suggest you use a journal and just pour out your thoughts and feelings that way, and you'll be more empty and ready to be filled with what's true and right. And so after we pour, we ask. We're ready to be filled with our guide, the guidance that we want to receive. And the 2 questions that I encourage you to ask, and that I teach my children to ask each morning, because they're really powerful questions, are: number 1, who would you have me help today, and how? And there's really 3 categories in that question. We can think about who we can serve, what we can do for someone. 2 is what we can teach, where we can think of ways that we can teach others. And 3 is what we can create. So thoughts may come to us about a video we can create, or some sort of, maybe it's cookies that we can give somebody, some way that we can start using our creative gifts to bless the world around us. And as we do that, we start to understand them more, be more led to what they are, and they start to grow. So that question is super important for those 3 categories, because it's how we start to come to understand our talents and gifts. And the second question number 2, is how would you have me grow? Again, if you're not religious, I guess you could say, how should I grow today? But I always ask God, how would you have me grow? And the 3 categories under that question that we can think about is: what can I learn, what can I study, and what can I practice? And so this doesn't necessarily have to be, like the violin. That's what my son always puts on his list, is something he can practice, is his violin. It can be a character trait. It can be patience and forgiveness or whatever, but we're thinking of ways that we can grow proactively, and things that we can learn. A lot of times a book or an article will come to my mind that I've been meaning to read. So those are the kind of things that are under that category: learn, study, and practice. So as we ask those 2 questions, we'll have some thoughts come to our minds, and there may be more. So that's when we start to study. We take out inspired writings. For me, it's the scriptures, and I look for clues as to how maybe I can do that work better, how I can help someone better with them. I might even be inspired to share one of those scriptures with them, or to live that way a little more clearly. And so I study things out, and I also will write down a scripture that sends out to me, or any thoughts that come to my mind. I encourage my kids to at least write 1 scripture, because often as we write, we'll think, oh, that's a really cool scripture, and we're writing it down, and we realize a lot more, it becomes a lot more deep to us, so we see more meaning in it than we had before we wrote. So that's a really powerful thing. That's step number 4, is to write. And then the next thing we do is we prioritize. And that way, at this point, we have a list of things we felt inspired to do, and we may not be able to get to all of them today. So we prioritize. This is the most important one, and then 2 and 3 and 4, and we realize we start with number 1, and we just go down the list and do it. Of course, there's going to be tasks in our day. For me, I've got to make sure we do our family devotion, and then we have a meal, and we have different tasks. But in between those tasks, as we can, we do work on this priority list, and we try to make sure that we do those directives that we felt inspired to take, which is another reason why it's important to make other connection rituals in our day, because it's really easy when we get caught up in our day and the things we got to do to forget all the things we wrote down. So if we establish another time where we'll connect and make sure that we're doing our jobs or the things we feel inspired to do, it can be really helpful. So I encourage you maybe to set a timer on your phone or to establish some other rituals as well. And then step number 6 is to place them. So you place them in a place where you will see them again, so you don't forget. For me, I like to place mine in my phone. Well, I used to put them on my, I would put it on my screensaver, but then I found it was still distracting because my apps would distract me. So then I put them right here where my driver's license spot is supposed to go. I write down my things there so that every time I open my phone, I see them and remember them without having to look at my screen and getting distracted with the apps. So that's one thing I like to do. There's other ways, of course. You can put them somewhere where you often are, maybe in your bathroom mirror or your fridge or something that will help you remember what you set out to do. So that takes us to step 7, the last step we were going to talk about today. And that's to work with the cycles in our life. So, like I said, sometimes we feel really inspired to go towards in a certain direction, and we're excited. I'm going to work on my health right now, and I'm going to totally do this for the rest of my life. And then things come up, and we start to get deflated from that. Or maybe we feel inspired to start working on something else. Maybe we need to declutter or something. And it can be easy to just feel overwhelmed all the time because there's so many things that we want to work on. But we have to remember that when we work on one character trait, we're strengthening all the others. When we work in one area of our life, we strengthen our character, and we're better able to move forward in the other areas in our life. So it's okay. We shouldn't beat ourselves up for changing goals or for focusing on one more than another at a certain season in our life. Because as we do, when we come back to the old goal we used to have that we were trying to work on, we'll find it becomes much more easy because we've built our character by working on the new goal that we felt inspired to work on. So life is full of cycles. We see it in the seasons. We see it, butterflies and all sorts of things. And we've got to be willing to work with them in ourselves too. And to not get down on ourselves, but to realize that we're just practicing, and that the more we practice in any area of our life, the better we become at that character trait we're trying to build. And so that really helps us be able to move forward with peace and confidence instead of with frustration every time we can't keep every goal that we set, because we know that it's there for practice, and they're just tools for getting us to something higher and better. And so that's the last thing I wanted to mention, is just that we're here to practice. So like I said earlier, when I used to beat myself up a lot, it was a lot of times because I was so inconsistent, and I did switch from thing to thing, and I had goals that I didn't keep, and I got mad at myself for not being more disciplined. But as I've come to realize that it's okay, that part of weakness is that I grow closer to God as I turn to Him, and and that my life is happier as I turn to Him, then I don't get so upset with my weakness. I can keep practicing and getting up when I make mistakes and trying again, and being joyful in that and being happy in that purpose. I mention my little girl on this slide because one of the things that's really taught me to be able to do this well is my 6-year-old daughter. Her name is Joy, and she is a lot like me in personality. And so it's so fun to watch her sometimes get upset with herself, or I mean, that sounds rude, but to see her little personality and how she tries and then she doesn't do it, and then she's like, I just tried and I can't do it. And I just started noticing that that's me, right? And that's how God sees me. I'm just so proud of her for trying, and I don't get mad at her for making mistakes. I'm just proud that she's going to try again. And I got to be like that, see myself that way as well. And to remember that I'm just a little girl. We're all just little in God's eyes, and we're just practicing and little kids trying to do our best, and He loves us and will forgive us and will be happy when we try again. So that's what makes practice, this idea of, or this mentality of practice, a much more peaceful way to live than this idea of goals and trying to keep them and using our grit and willpower to make sure we do them. So thanks for listening. I hope you found this webinar helpful. I hope you're able to pull away some tools and things that you can start applying that will bless your family and yourself. And I hope that as you finish the basic training, that you'll even have more tools and more ideas as to how you can move forward into life more joyfully and with more purpose and desire for good. And so thanks for listening, and I will see you soon.